Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Silent, but deadly. The grass waves to the breath-filled song of the wind. No, wait. That doesn't sound quite right. Maybe just the voice of the wind. The luscious grass dances as the wind sings. Something like that anyway. I look around me, casually, like I'm taking in the view, and not at all looking for a sudden change in the landscape that would signal my end. Should I admit that I'm scared? I'd be mad not to. But then this is madness. I'm narrating my life because my life actually depends on it. The moment I go quiet, it'll come for me. I know that much. Sneaky bollocks, tricking people into being quiet when that's how it finds them. I still don't get that. What form of creature finds its prey via silence? I thought it might hate sound, but no one is quiet in their final moments. And it doesn't seem fazed by the screaming. I shouldn't talk about that. Difficult to filter, though. I can't stop the words coming out. The words are my shield. All I have to do is think of things to say as I walk these next few fields, and then I'll be in the next village, and I can find a radio or just something, anything, to make some noise for me. Then I can sleep. I am so tired. Wait a minute. What if I yawn? Does a yawn count? Or will I be interrupting the flow of sound that protects me? I can't fall or hit a limb against anything, nor can I snag myself on an errant nail. Errant. Where did that come from? I've noticed that my language is getting more flowery. That's good. I don't have to find quite so many words. They're flowing out from me, as though the tap in my mind has been turned a little more. I never knew I had a tap in my mind. This'll do. I can manage this. And I need to stay on top of it, conscious of the stream. I don't want to get carried away and pause in a fog of confusion. I could say any old words. I could do that, but I think I'd go mad as I stirred that crazy word salad around. And then where would I be? I need to keep it together, find somewhere to sit it out, surround myself with a wall of sound, and then sleep. Sleep seems a world away. I'd need someone with me so we could take it in turns to sit watch. Would that work? Would a radio even work? Does it work if the noise isn't coming from you? Does the quality of the sound make a difference? A voice that comes from a mouth is different to one that comes via a speaker. Am I kidding myself? Does it matter that I'm kidding myself? I've made it this far, and that's pretty good. I had safety in numbers for a while back there. It's about survival now. I'm on my own. I've got to keep going. Buy myself time. The creatures might not even be here anymore. Moved on to easier pickings. I don't believe that for a moment. You're still there, aren't you guys? Watching and waiting. All I have to do is pause these words of mine, and you'll be skipping out to meet me in the middle of this damn field. I'd say that you don't see them coming. That's not quite right. It's that when you do see them coming, you're done for. Game over. What little warning you have is useless. A blur of movement. Pain. Gone. You can't outrun what you can't see. They don't move like anything on this earth. There's no approach, no stalking. They come from nowhere, and the more I think about it, I do think they come from some other dimension. They just appear as though they can pass through gaps in space-time that we can't see. Could they be demons? That makes more and more sense to me. Come to snatch our souls away. Consume us. The end of days. No one thought it would look like this, sound like this. Do our voices cover another sound? The beating of our hearts? Or is it really the sound of our silence that beckons them forth? I'm searching for answers where I think there are likely none. That's what we do, though, isn't it? We search for answers. We walk into a room we've never been in before, and we wonder what the hell it all is. Thankfully, rooms have conventions, like bloody walls and a sodding floor and a buggering ceiling, crappy sofas if it's a living room, a shitty cooker, and an arsehole fridge if it's a kitchen, a bastard bed if it's a... What the hell has happened here? It looks the same, but it's entirely different. I loved walking through these fields. Now it's all painted in violent death. Everyone's violent death. My violent death. I don't want to die. Not like this. But what makes me different? What makes me so special that I think I can evade the fate of everyone else? I'd laugh if this wasn't so serious. I don't think I'll ever laugh again. At least it's quick. It seems quick, anyway. Oh, what if they drag you through those invisible gaps? What if the pain goes on beyond what I have seen? Why do my thoughts go there? Think happy thoughts. Why is the bloody happy cupboard bare? I wish we lived by the sea. That would be nice. I wonder whether they can follow you over the water. I hope not. I hope there are places that they can't go. I hope they eventually give up. They won't, though, will they? Would we? Perhaps they're aliens, or a lab experiment gone wrong. Doesn't matter, though, does it? If my nemesis introduced himself as Norman, shook my hand, and did me the courtesy of telling me what he was, where he came from, and why he and his mates were wreaking violent and bloody murder across the planet, it doesn't change the important bit, does it? I'm not going to smile and tell him that that's all right then. I suppose it would give me the opportunity for a moment of defiance. I could tell Norman, the planet conqueror, to bugger off. You know what? I can do that anyway, can't I? I can shout my defiance at this new world of Normans. I might not have the final word, but I'll have given him what for. Might even feel good, if only for the duration of my shouting. Yeah, I'm going to do it. What have I got to lose? I'm going to lose anyway, so may as well go for it. Tell you what, Norman, I'm going to primal scream it. I'm going to dig deep down and bring my ancient part to the fore. We are animals, after all. A force to be reckoned with. And I don't give a shit if I lose my voice doing it. I will keep talking afterwards in any case. You're not getting me like that, you sneaky little bastard. Here goes. Bugger off, Norman. Yeah. Wow. Hey, what was that? I can still see it. A gap. Norman! I shouted, a gap open. That's why you don't like our voices. Our voices are our power. Oh yes, of course they are. This changes everything. Yes. I'm going to bring it to you, Normie baby. I'm going through that gap of yours, and I'm going to shout your whole house down. What else is there? I can't keep this talk up. You'll get me in the end if I keep running away. But if I bring it to you and shout you down, that might just do it. I'm coming for you, Norm. And we're going to talk it out. Just you and me. Then, when we're done, I'll tell all your friends. I've got hope now, Norman. Hope and a plan. Best of all, I have belief. That makes me dangerous. We're not sheep. We were never sheep. We're not even wolves. We're different, and we're difficult. We're magic, Norman. And my words are a spell you are not going to break. Coming, whether you're ready or not.
You don't like me. When you look in your mirror, surely you tell yourself you are beautiful. Oh, I am very sure you often tell yourself that. Do you admire your fit body after the gym and tell yourself you are perfect? Or at least think you are? The feeling of rejection followed him throughout his life. It was there when school children pushed him and laughed at his looks. His face wasn't horrific, but it had imperfections, a slightly crooked nose, uneven skin tone, eyes that always seemed tired. The children called him monster, mocking him mercilessly. He wore glasses and a fixed brace for his teeth. He never had any friends. He always sat alone in the back of the classroom, trying to hide from a world that didn't want him. His mother was the only person who loved him, or so she claimed. She told him not to listen to what others said, that people are cruel. But her words were not enough. When she died, he was left alone. Loneliness became a constant in his life, deep and heavy like a stone choking him. Years later, technology offered him a new chance. On social media, no one needed to see his face right away. He could carefully choose his words, write messages that were thoughtful, kind. For a moment, he believed he could find someone who would understand him. But the responses were always the same. Sorry, you're not my type. Please don't message me again. You're creepy. Each message was another blow. He tried again, each time hoping for a different outcome. But they all rejected him, and their words were like poison chilling his blood. One night, as he sat at his computer reading another rejection message, something in him snapped. His hands trembled as he closed his laptop. "Why?" he whispered, addressing the empty room. His voice was quiet, but it trembled with anger. Why me? The world didn't want him. That was now clear, but he no longer wanted them. They had made him this way, and he would no longer beg. He didn't have to belong to their world. The idea was faint at first, like a shadow on the edge of consciousness. But as the days passed, it became clearer. He began to imagine a perfect being, someone who would never reject him, someone who wouldn't see his imperfections. In his mind, everything became clearer. Every woman he had ever seen had something special. Eyes, smile, hands, legs. He could combine all those perfect parts into one being. The first victim was a girl he had watched in a store. Her eyes were incredible, deep blue, almost unreal. He had followed her for days, studying her habits. He noticed she always took the same path home, a dark alley behind a building. One night, as the rain lightly fell, he waited in the shadows. His heart raced as he gripped the knife in his pocket. When she appeared, her steps were quiet, but they echoed in his head. He approached from behind, his hand trembling as he drew the knife. It all happened quickly. Her body fell onto the concrete with a dull thump. He carried her to his basement, avoiding streetlights. His body was tense, his heart pounding in his chest, but he felt something akin to excitement. In the basement, under the dim light of a bulb, he sat at a table. Her eyes were fixed on him, lifeless, yet still perfect. With surgical precision, he removed them and prepared them. When he placed them on the face of the doll, he experienced a joy he had never felt before. "Perfect," he whispered, looking at the doll that had just received its first aspect of perfection. His obsession grew with each new victim. After the first, he felt an indescribable relief. The doll, although still incomplete, now had eyes that radiated perfection, but it wasn't enough. He knew he had to continue. Every night he left his house, choosing carefully. Each woman had something he deemed worthy. Sometimes he sat in cafes, quietly observing passers-by. His eyes focused on the minute details, the shape of fingers, the line of a neck, a perfect smile. The second victim was a woman with beautiful hands. Her fingers, long and delicate, were like instruments that captivated his attention. He followed her for several days, studying her habits. He realized she always went to a small shop at the end of the street on Thursdays, always alone. The preparation was perfect. That evening, he waited around the corner where the lamp's light didn't reach. When she walked past him, he quickly grabbed her. Her body was light, her resistance weak. Her hands were now part of his puzzle. When he returned to the basement, he felt joy as he assembled parts of the doll. The fingers fit perfectly onto the body he was carefully constructing. He sat for hours, watching his work. "It's getting closer," he whispered to himself. The third victim was a woman with a smile that captivated him. Her lips were shaped as if always ready to smile. He followed her as she walked her dog in the park, noting every detail of her face. The basement windows were closed, covered with layers of old newspapers and sticky tape. Light only came from a single bulb hanging on a cable above a table covered with blood-stained cloths and scalpels arranged in perfect order. The floor was covered with a plastic sheet that crackled under his steps. The basement was his refuge, a place where the world couldn't find him. In the basement, his work began to take shape. Each body part was carefully chosen and joined with precision. The doll now had eyes, hands, lips, even hair, all parts of his vision of perfection. Every evening, he sat beside her, talking to her. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, as he recounted events from the past. He told her about school days when he was the subject of ridicule, about days when he was invisible to everyone except those who wanted to hurt him. He had to continue to complete his creation. He enjoyed the company of his perfect masterpiece. Soon he found many more victims to add even more perfect female parts. He was captivated. With a smile, he talked to her about life. She listened silently and watched him with her deep blue eyes. His steps echoed through the quiet streets. As he watched passers-by, every detail on their bodies was potential. The shape of hands, the line of a jaw, the curve of a neck, all had the potential to become part of his vision. His latest target was not random. She was a woman he had seen at the bus stop every evening. Her hair, light like gold, fell over her shoulders, and her hands were gentle yet strong. In her eyes, he saw the peace he lacked. He followed her carefully from a distance, studying every move she made. In her, he saw the key to completing his creation. The basement had become everything to him. The thick, cold walls retained the sense of his deeds, the smells of decay, chemicals, and metal. On the table, tools lay in perfect order. The scalpel was the most important, sharp, precise. As he worked, he felt like an artist. His hands were steady, his movements careful. The doll was becoming his only truth, the only thing that gave him a sense of purpose. As he sat in front of his creation, he felt he had reached the pinnacle, but that perfection did not bring peace. His pain did not disappear. The doll could not speak, could not provide what he truly lacked: love. The decay was unbearable. The doll, his masterpiece, began to decompose before his eyes. The smell seeped into every pore, and the body parts, once perfect, now became shadows of what they had been. "Why?" he whispered, as he sat on the chair, head bowed. "Why can't I keep what is perfect?" As he sat beside his doll, he watched as the light from the bulb fell on her unnaturally white eyes that once were blue. He spoke to her softly, almost tenderly, as if to someone who understood all his pains. "You are the only thing in this world that is true," he said, "but the world does not allow perfection. Everything that is beautiful, everything that has value, they destroy it." The light went out, but the silence didn't bring peace. The doll remained motionless as the darkness of the basement enveloped its body. In that darkness, the only sound was his breathing, uneven, heavy, as if each breath carried the weight of years of pain. The light went out, but the silence didn't bring peace. The doll remained motionless as the darkness of the basement enveloped its body. In that darkness, the only sound was his breathing, uneven, heavy, as if each breath carried the weight of years of pain. He sat across from the doll, leaning on a chair that creaked under his weight. He looked at it, at the eyes he had chosen so carefully, at the hands he had joined with precision, at the smile that once seemed to him like the answer to all his unspoken prayers. But now, in the darkness, the silence gave him no solace. "Why is everything I touch doomed to ruin?" he muttered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The silence didn't soothe him. On the contrary, it grew louder. In it, he could hear every unspoken reproach of the world that had rejected him. He heard the voices of the girls who mocked him, the whispers of children who ridiculed him, the words women sent him on social media. "You're creepy. You're not my type. Please don't message me again." Those words, buried deep in his mind, echoed as his hands trembled on his knees. The doll was now complete, but the emptiness within him grew larger. He felt that space devouring him from the inside, as if even all the body parts he had so carefully selected couldn't fill what he lacked. "You are everything I ever wanted," he whispered, addressing it. His eyes were full of tears that couldn't fall. "But why do I still feel this way?" He raised his hand and gently touched its face. It was cold, rigid, motionless. There was no life in it. "Is this all I have?" The silence didn't answer. That night, he sat in the basement as hours passed. He stared into the darkness, thinking about every moment of his life, about every glance that passed over him as if he didn't exist, about every judgment and every rejection. "If perfection doesn't exist," he said quietly to himself, "then what is left for me?" He closed his eyes. His hands slipped off his knees, and his head fell back. The darkness enveloped him completely as his world grew quieter than ever before. Several hours passed. The basement was filled with silence, but it was no longer the same. It was thicker, heavier, pressing down on every part of his body. His breathing became slower, quieter, as he silently repeated the sentences he often said. "You are everything I ever wanted," he whispered. His voice was now lifeless, as though it shattered against the basement walls and immediately vanished. He reached out toward the doll and touched its face. The surface was cold, almost hostile, and for a moment it felt like it was rejecting him. He pulled his hand back, like a child recoiling from a flame. "You were supposed to love me," he said louder. His eyes, now dry, stared into its eyes, empty, lifeless, full of reflections of everything he had lost. In the doll, he saw himself. Every piece had been chosen to create perfection, but now he understood that perfection was nothing but an illusion. His creation was a reflection of himself, stitched together from fragments that could never be whole. "I gave everything for you," he whispered, lowering his head into his hands. "Everything I had, I gave." But in the silence of the basement, he began to understand the truth. The doll couldn't love him because it had no soul, and she, like him, was nothing but emptiness. Memories began to flood over him. He saw his mother gently hugging him, telling him not to pay attention to what others thought. He remembered her smile, the last smile he had ever felt as genuine. "Where are you now?" he whispered into the darkness. But that smile had been lost long ago, just like everything else. The doll couldn't love him, the world couldn't love him, and he could no longer love himself. The silence became unbearable. The emptiness inside him was too vast. His hand moved toward the light switch but didn't turn it on. Instead, he sank to the floor, leaning against the wall, and closed his eyes. As he sat in the dark, he realized there were no more answers. The doll, his only companion, stood motionless, a shadow in the darkness. His sigh rose softly, but it wasn't a prayer or a threat. It was the end. "You think you are perfect?" he said for the last time. His voice was weak, almost extinguished. "You are wrong. Perfection doesn't exist."
Foreboding. It was all too much, really. The woman and the boy dragged their tired legs through the deep snow. Ahead of them, far off in the distance, lay the undulating, snow-covered hills where the log cabin they were heading for had been built many years previously. The two could picture in their minds a blazing fire and hot chocolate with little marshmallows floating on the surface. And it was this that kept them going. The boy, a young teenager, often had to support the woman and help her across fallen trees that hampered their progress. The woman was exhausted, and every few minutes she stopped, leaning heavily over her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. The boy stopped with her every time, but his eyes kept traveling anxiously across the vast expanse of land they had to cross to reach their goal. Being younger and fitter, he didn't need as many breaks as the woman did. But he never complained. It was more important for him to bring the woman back alive than to force her to walk faster. They set off again, the woman hanging on to the boy's arm. The surface underneath them suddenly turned slippery. They had reached the frozen lake finally. There was still a long way to go, but at least there were no hills or fallen trees to navigate. The woman stopped again. Her breathing was labored, and she had trouble drawing a deep enough breath to regain some strength. She was crying from the exhaustion. The boy knelt down and held her. His face was worried and concerned. His hands shook somewhat as he gently patted the woman's back. A man walked past in a sideways manner, like a crab. He waved at the pair and smiled. The woman stretched out a hand towards the man, imploringly, and the boy gave him a surly look. But the man just smiled again and continued through the deep snow. He wore only one snowshoe, which explained his strange gait, but it didn't seem to hamper his progress. He flattened the snow with his snowshoe-clad foot and hardly sunk through the snow at all with the other foot. The woman looked at the flattened snow and then looked up at the boy. He smiled at her. At least there would now be an easier path for them to use. The woman straightened up and, sensing renewed vigor, pulled the boy to his feet. They hugged, took each other's hand, and started walking again. Ahead of them, the man continued his crab walk, humming a monotonous tune that sounded more like a low rumble than anything else. He turned his head, saw them walking behind him, and motioned for them to follow, nodding his head encouragingly. As the man forged ahead in front of them, the distance between them and him grew. The man was walking unnaturally fast, considering the conditions and his unconventional gait, and the boy grew anxious. He tried to walk faster to keep up, and the distance between him and the woman increased unrelentingly. She called his name, but he seemed oblivious. He had his eyes firmly on the man, who was now barely visible far ahead of them, and did not stop when the woman needed a break again. She called him feebly, but she had no strength to raise her voice. She cried again, cursing her tired legs and laboring lungs. Once more, she bent over her knees, trying to catch her breath. She wanted to scream. She wanted to beg the boy to wait, but no words could be heard. A flutter on the wind, a change in the vibrations another human being causes when they disturb the airflow, caused her to look up. The boy was no longer visible from her vantage point, bent double over her knees. She straightened up quickly, her heart beating faster. Where was the boy? Squinting to look in front of her, she suddenly saw his head pop up, arms flailing, and then disappear again. Her heart fell into her stomach. He had gone through the ice. Finding a strength she didn't know she had, the woman ran. The snow was deep and felt like syrup. She screamed in frustration and then called the boy's name. As she got closer, she slowed down, walking fast but carefully towards the boy. He was bobbing up and down again, waving his arms, but he made no sound. The cold water had robbed him of his voice, and his open mouth, so poignant in his horrified face, only mimicked the sound he was trying to make. Suddenly, he disappeared again, and only his hand was sticking up over the snow. The woman, no longer trying to be cautious, threw herself down on the ice and found his hand. Seconds before, it would have disappeared under the water. She felt the boy grabbing the hand, and she pulled, the adrenaline and fear giving her more strength than she had ever had before. The boy's head appeared again. He looked straight at the woman, and there was a panic in his eyes that scared her more than anything else. She noticed that there wasn't much room for his head, and with a jolt of fear, she realized the fissure in the ice was closing up, and fast. The boy's head disappeared under the water again, despite her holding on to his hand, and the hole kept closing. Now, there was no way the boy could get his head through the hole to draw breath again, and she screamed in fear and panic. With her free hand, she started pounding on the ice around the hole. The ice was too hard, and her frail beating could not even chip away at the surface. Keeping a firm hold on the hand that still gripped hers convulsively, she tried bashing a hole in the ice with the heel of one boot, but the ice would not even crack. The boy's hand started losing its grip on her hand, and she wailed in desperation, stomping harder on the ice, standing up to add weight to the pounding on the ice. She lost her grip on the boy's hand, and it slipped below the water, the hole finally closing inexorably around it with a sucking sound. Far away from the location in her dream, the woman woke up sobbing, sweat moistening her forehead and shaking from head to toe. A pain in her chest so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The woman tried taking a deep breath. She was moaning, and her heart was beating so rapidly it hurt. Next to her, her husband was snoring loudly, completely oblivious to her plight. This was nothing new. It would more than likely take an earthquake to wake him up at this hour, and she didn't need him anyway. She gently pushed the blankets aside and slipped out of bed. She had to make sure he was safe. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Tiptoeing across the hall, shivering slightly in the cold night air that permeated the house, she arrived in her older son's bedroom. A soft snoring could be heard from the room. As she neared, a quiet meow greeted her. Looking into the room, the lamp-like eyes of their cat Brandy were staring back at her, and the animal meowed quietly again. Letting her breath out, she hadn't even been aware of holding it. She tiptoed over to stroke the cat gently. "Good girl, you stay with him. Keep him safe for me." Looking down upon her teenage son, his mouth open and his wavy hair in disarray around his peaceful face, she felt her throat constrict slightly, and she had to swallow hard to stifle the moan that had almost escaped her mouth again. The dream was still so alive in her mind, and the sense of foreboding was making her eyes water, her chest aching so much she was afraid it would burst open, wanting desperately to wake him up just to hold him. She instead stretched her hand out, stroking her son's forehead gently before retreating out into the hall again. Feeling compelled to check on her younger son as well, she continued down the hall to the third bedroom. He was sleeping on top of his covers, his little thumb securely lodged in his mouth. She could tell he was cold as he was curled up in a fetal position, and she carefully tugged the blanket out from under him, covering his little body and tucking it in around the sides of the bed. There was no point in going back to bed now. She was wide awake, and in less than an hour and a half, she would have to be up to help the kids get ready for school. She tiptoed past her husband, still in his bed, snoring loudly, to grab her bathrobe, and then snuck downstairs to make a cup of tea. Sunlight was forcing its way into her kitchen when she arrived back downstairs, penetrating dusty corners and pushing through a curtain of tiny dust particles that had been stirred up as she grabbed a tea towel to wipe the cup. And she sat down at the kitchen table, carefully sipping a steaming cup of Earl Grey. She still felt cold inside, shivering slightly, even as the warm liquid made its way to her empty stomach. The image of her son's head disappearing under the ice in her dream, still so clear in her mind, it was making her shake her head repeatedly, as if to rid herself of an annoying fly. She was wringing her hands, moaning quietly every time she saw the hand disappearing under the ice in her mind's eye. Would she ever be able to forget this dream? Little tiny clicks on the kitchen floor told her that Brandy had decided to join her in the kitchen. The cat looked up at the woman as she rounded the kitchen island on her way to her food bowl, but seemed entirely intent on wanting to satisfy her hunger for food before satisfying other needs, such as attention from her human owner. And she beat her regular path right over to her food bowl without stopping. The bowl was empty. Accusing feline eyes locked into hers. Brandy sat down, looked back at her bowl, and then up again at the woman. It was obvious that the cat was asking for food, but the woman who was still feeling faint from her nightmare, seemed oblivious. A soft meow, mingled with a purr, escaped the tiny mouth as the cat stood back up again and sauntered over. Wrapping herself around the human legs, she began a relentless meowing until the woman finally surrendered and got up off her chair to feed the cat. That's when she saw it. Next to the canister where they kept the cat's food, there was a pile of unopened and unchecked mail from the day before. On the top, underneath a blue envelope, apparently sent out by Publishers Clearinghouse, she was probably about to win $5,000 a week for life, was something white. She realized that she was looking at a picture of snow, and with trepidation and horrific foreboding, she pulled the catalog out from under the envelope. It was a magazine on vacation cottages in northern Maine. Her husband had been canvassing for this vacation for months and had obviously ordered the catalog. And on the front was a picture of a rustic-looking cabin with snowdrifts lapping the windows. In the background, a frozen lake could be seen. The woman caught her breath and felt her knees buckle. Next to the cabin, locking eyes with her from the picture, stood the man from her dream, smiling benignly, holding his hand out towards the cottage. In his other hand, he was holding one snowshoe. Mercifully, darkness enveloped her, and she escaped. For a while. It was all too much, really. In the silence of ashes, Jacob's fingers trembled against the dented tin cup, water sloshing perilously close to the rim. The November air carved his lungs raw, bitter with smoke from chimneys that transformed flesh to ash. His worn shoes navigated the mud between barracks, sidestepping puddles that mirrored a colorless sky. At 13, Jacob had perfected invisibility. 3 years of silence, not by choice, but necessity after witnessing his father's execution, had rendered him a ghost among the living dead that shuffled through the camp. While other boys his age had been selected for immediate disposal, Jacob's muteness had ironically preserved him. The guards found utility in a servant who could never repeat their secrets, who existed in the peripheral shadows of their consciousness. The SS officers spoke freely in his presence. Plans whispered, transports scheduled, executions ordered, all captured in the flawless vault of Jacob's mind, where every detail existed in perfect recall, a gift that had once earned him praise from teachers in another lifetime. Before yellow stars and cattle cars, Obersturmführer Kruger waited in his usual spot, a folding chair positioned in the sliver of shade beside Barracks 7. Jacob knew the man's habits with precision. The hat removal, 17 minutes into his shift. The triple tap of his boot before sitting. The heavy eyes, exactly 40 minutes after lunch. Schneller, Junge! Kruger barked, gesturing impatiently as Jacob approached. Jacob quickened his pace, keeping his eyes fixed on the shallow pool of water in the cup. One did not look directly at the gods of this underworld. The men who decided, with casual flicks of their fingers, who would breathe another day and who would feed the insatiable furnaces. Kruger snatched the cup, gulping noisily. Water escaped his lips, tracking through the dust on his chin. Jacob stood motionless, hands clasped before him, awaiting dismissal or further orders. The guard's eyes were bloodshot, the whites yellowed like old paper. Night duty in the processing center, Jacob surmised. New transports had arrived yesterday, which always meant sleepless shifts for the guards. "Wait," Kruger muttered, settling deeper into his chair. "I might want more." Jacob nodded once, the barest acknowledgement of the command. He knew stillness, as others knew prayer. A ritual of survival, practiced until it became reflex. The camp existed in constant motion, guards shouting, prisoners shuffling, machine guns occasionally stuttering their terrible poetry of death. To be still was to disappear. Minutes stretched. Kruger's head gradually lolled forward, his breathing deepening. The cup tilted dangerously in his loosening grip. Jacob watched through lowered lashes as the guard surrendered to sleep. The keys hanging from Kruger's belt caught the weak sunlight, transforming ordinary metal into something mythic. Freedom incarnate. Jacob's pulse accelerated, blood rushing in his ears like distant artillery. No guard ever slept on duty. The punishment was severe. Perhaps not death, but certainly disgrace. This aberration might never repeat itself. A singular crack in the impenetrable wall of captivity. Jacob's mind calculated with the precision of mathematics. 4 minutes until the patrol passed the northern fence. 7 minutes until roll call at the women's barracks would divert attention eastward. The electric generator hummed 60 meters to the west, powering the final barrier between imprisonment and possibility. His fingers, trained by years of obedience, trembled with rebellion as they reached toward the key ring. A lifetime compressed into a single breath as metal brushed against metal with the whisper of butterfly wings. The ring slid free. Jacob backed away silently, the keys clutched against his chest like a talisman. The dormant power they represented sent electric currents through his body, awakening nerves long numbed by survival. For the first time in 3 years, a ghost became solid. A shadow contemplated substance. A boy allowed himself to remember the concept of hope. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Jacob's pocket as he slipped between the skeletal shadows of barracks. His mind projected every detail of the camp upon the canvas of his consciousness. A perfect map etched by thousands of forced errands. There, the blind spot behind the infirmary, where guards rarely patrolled. Here, the drainage ditch that ran beneath the eastern fence. partially obscured by withered weeds. Each movement demanded precision, as afternoon shadows stretched across the packed earth. Jacob became one with them. Another darkness, moving among darkness, his emaciated form barely disturbing the air. The camp's architecture revealed itself differently now. What had been a prison became a puzzle box, and Jacob held the solution in his trembling hand. 327 steps to the generator shed, a left turn at the kitchens, skirt the infirmary, avoid the dogs kenneled near the northern guard tower. Gunther, the shepherd with the white spot on his muzzle, raised his head as Jacob passed downwind. The animal's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Jacob froze, becoming stone. The dog's amber eyes held his for an eternal moment before dismissing him. Just another walking skeleton, carrying neither food nor threat. Jacob released the breath he'd been holding and continued his careful trajectory toward freedom. The world had shrunk to immediate sensations. Ribs against lungs, the metallic taste of fear, fabric against skin. Nothing existed beyond this moment of movement, this singular pursuit of escape. A sudden commotion erupted near the eastern fence. Jacob pressed himself against Barracks 12, becoming one with its weathered planks as two guards rushed past. Not for him, not yet. The keys remained undiscovered. As the guards disappeared, Jacob continued his journey through the camp's service areas, places where a silent child became as invisible as dust motes in sunlight. He reached the narrow passage between buildings where mud gave way to gravel, treacherous ground that might announce his presence. Jacob moved with the deliberate care of a tightrope walker, testing each step. A soft sound stopped him. A whimper, barely audible, drifting from beneath the elevated supply depot. Jacob hesitated, freedom calling from just beyond. The sensible choice was clear. Continue, escape, survive. Yet he found himself crouching, peering into the darkness beneath the structure. 5 pairs of eyes reflected the meager light. Children, younger than himself, huddled together like rabbits in a warren. Their gaunt faces registered shock at his discovery. One boy raised a finger to cracked lips, pleading for silence that Jacob had mastered years ago. They had escaped a selection. That much was obvious. Children deemed too small for work were immediate candidates for the chambers. These 5 had somehow slipped away, hiding in this temporary sanctuary, while death searched elsewhere. Jacob knew their fate was sealed. The hiding place would be discovered within hours. The dogs would find them, or hunger would drive them into the open. Their brief rebellion against inevitability would end as all rebellions did in this place, with smoke rising from chimneys. His hand closed around the keys in his pocket. One boy, for certain, could navigate the camp's dangers. 5 children multiplied the risk exponentially. Mathematics again. Probability, chance, the cold equations of survival. The smallest child, a girl with eyes too large for her hollowed face, extended one skeletal hand toward him, not begging, not pleading, offering connection, humanity. Something the camp had systematically stripped away layer by layer until only animal survival remained. Jacob's memory flashed to his father's final words before the guards beat him silent. Remember who you are. He made his decision with quick, efficient gestures. Jacob motioned for them to follow. The children untangled themselves from their hiding place, emerging like shadows gaining substance. Their movements were clumsy with fear and weakness, but their eyes held absolute focus on Jacob, their unexpected savior, their silent Moses. The smallest girl slipped her hand into his. Her palm was fever hot against his cold fingers. The contact sent electricity through Jacob's arm, awakening something long dormant. Responsibility, connection, purpose beyond mere survival. Together, they became a small constellation of desperate stars, moving through the gathering twilight toward the generator shed and the possibility of freedom beyond. The generator shed vibrated at the camp's edge. Its drone masked 6 pairs of feet, navigating between the fences as Jacob led with a cartographer's confidence. Evening patrol would begin in 17 minutes. Searchlights would sweep the eastern perimeter in 12. The rhythm of the camp's security beat within Jacob's consciousness, like a second heartbeat. The smallest girl, her name yet unspoken between them, clung to his hand with surprising strength. Behind them, the other children followed in a chain of desperate hope, each grasping the clothing of the one ahead. Their collective breath formed ghostly plumes in the November air, spectral evidence of lives not yet extinguished. Jacob reached the generator shed's rusted door. 3 keys tried, 3 keys rejected, before the 4th slid home. The lock surrendered with a reluctant click that seemed thunderous in his heightened awareness. He ushered the children inside, pulling the door closed behind them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the red glow of indicator lights. The smell of oil and metal replaced the camp's perpetual stench of suffering. The generator's pulse vibrated through the concrete floor into their bones. Jacob's memory reconstructed the shed's interior with perfect clarity. He had been brought here once to clean grease spills, one of countless menial tasks assigned to the camp's silent shadow. His fingers traced metal casings and wire housing until he found what he sought, the main control panel. Behind him, the children huddled together for warmth and courage. The oldest boy, perhaps 10, whispered something in Polish that Jacob couldn't understand. The words dissolved into the mechanical growl surrounding them. Language had become irrelevant. Only action mattered now. Through the shed's single grimy window, Jacob watched lights flicker on across the camp as day surrendered to evening. Searchlights awakened, their harsh beams cutting white arcs through gathering darkness. Guards emerged from barracks, rifles slung across shoulders. Somewhere, Obersturmführer Kruger would be awakening to the realization of his catastrophic error. Jacob's hands hovered over the generator's controls. His perfect memory recalled every wire, every connection observed during his brief exposure to the machine's inner workings. Disabling it would plunge the camp into darkness and deactivate the electrified fence. But the backup systems would engage within minutes. Their window for escape would be measured in heartbeats. A distant alarm shattered the twilight. A shrill mechanical scream that announced discovery. Whether Kruger's missing keys or the children's absence had triggered it remained unknown. The distinction was academic. The hunt had begun. The smallest girl pressed herself against Jacob's side, her body trembling like a captured bird. He placed a reassuring hand on her head, then turned his attention back to the generator. Its massive form contained both their imprisonment and their salvation. Jacob seized a wrench from a nearby workbench and wedged it between critical gears. With calculated force, he twisted until metal screamed against metal. Sparks erupted in blue-white constellations, reflected in the wide eyes of the watching children. The generator's rhythm faltered, coughed, then disintegrated into mechanical death throes. Lights across the camp flickered, dimmed, and died. Darkness descended like a blessing, punctuated only by the crimson pulse of emergency lights and the distant, frantic beams of guards' flashlights. Jacob yanked the shed door open. Freedom waited in the gathering night, separated from them by a single fence now rendered harmless. He gestured urgently to the children, pointing toward the eastern boundary, where forest began 200 meters beyond the perimeter. Dogs barked in the distance, savage, hungry sounds that accelerated their terror into action. The children poured from the shed like water finding its level, Jacob bringing up the rear. The smallest girl's hand remained locked in his as they navigated by instinct and starlight toward the fence. With his free hand, Jacob tested the metal mesh. No electricity hummed beneath his fingertips. The backup generators had not yet engaged. He boosted the smallest children over first, their bird-like bodies barely disturbing the wire. The older ones climbed with desperate strength, tumbling to freedom on the other side. As searchlights swept closer and dogs barking intensified, Jacob hoisted himself upward, muscles straining against the weight of exhaustion and malnutrition. barbed wire tore through his threadbare clothing, carving shallow furrows into his flesh. Pain registered as distant information, irrelevant to the imperative of movement. He dropped to the ground beyond the fence, landing beside the waiting children. The absent hum of electricity had been replaced by shouts and whistles, the camp awakening to their rebellion. Jacob pointed toward the dark line of trees in the distance. "Run," he mouthed silently, the word forming on lips that had forgotten speech. Together, they fled across open ground, 6 shadows merging with the greater darkness. Behind them, flashlight beams swept the area around the disabled generator. Ahead, the forest promised concealment, if not safety. The space between represented the most dangerous passage of their lives, exposed, vulnerable, illuminated by nothing but faith and starlight. The forest swallowed them whole. Pine needles cushioned their footfalls as the scent of resin replaced the camp's miasma with air that tasted of possibility. Jacob led them deeper into the wilderness, away from searchlights that strafed the forest edge like mechanical predators. Behind them, the camp's alarms continued their frantic cry, a sound that diminished with each step, but remained embedded in their consciousness like a splinter beneath skin. The smallest girl stumbled, her strength finally failing. Jacob caught her before she fell, lifting her slight weight into his arms. She weighed no more than autumn leaves, her bones fragile as a bird's, beneath his hands. Her head came to rest against his shoulder, absolute trust in the gesture. They continued for what might have been hours or minutes. Time had dissolved into meaningless abstraction. Distance alone mattered now. Every meter gained was a victory against death. The other children followed Jacob without question, their faith in his silent guidance absolute. A stream appeared, silver in the moonlight. Jacob gestured for them to drink. The water tasted of stone and stars, reviving something beyond their physical bodies. Perhaps hope, perhaps humanity. The oldest boy spoke, his voice a rusty hinge breaking the forest's solemn quiet. Müssen wir weitergehen? Must we go further? Jacob nodded, pointing deeper into the forest. The danger had not passed. Dogs could track them for kilometers. Morning would bring planes, searchers, consequences. The Reich did not surrender its prisoners easily, especially those who carried knowledge of what transpired behind electrified fences. The smallest girl stirred in his arms, her eyes reflecting fragments of moonlight. Her lips moved, forming words that emerged as a whisper. Jak się nazywasz? What is your name? The question penetrated layers of silence, built over years of survival. Jacob hadn't heard his own name spoken aloud since his father's death. It existed only in memory, a secret thing preserved from contamination by the camp's horrors. His throat constricted around unspoken syllables. Speech had become foreign territory, a country from which he had been exiled. Yet something stirred within the wasteland of his voice, a seed breaking through frozen ground after endless winter. "Jacob," he whispered, the sound strange and wonderful in the forest's embrace. His voice emerged broken, raw with disuse, but undeniably his own. "Jestem Jakob. I am Jacob." The girl's smile transformed her hollow face, revealing the ghost of beauty that starvation had nearly erased. "Estera," she replied, offering her name as a gift in exchange for his. The other children murmured their own names: Tomasz, Lilka, Beniek, David. Each syllable a reclamation of identity. The camp had attempted to replace with numbers. They stood in a tight circle beneath the ancient pines, no longer prisoners, not yet survivors, suspended in the fragile space between captivity and freedom. A distant howl shattered their momentary peace, the unmistakable voice of a tracking dog catching their scent. The hunt continued. Jacob set Estera gently on her feet and pointed westward, where the forest grew denser, offering deeper concealment. "Musimy biec," Estera said with quiet resolve. "We must run." Jacob nodded, taking her hand once more. Together, they plunged deeper into the wilderness. 6 children against an empire, armed with nothing but the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. The forest embraced them, branches parting to accept their flight, roots steadying their uncertain steps. Dawn found them huddled beneath a rocky overhang beside a wider stream. Exhaustion had claimed the younger children, while Jacob remained awake, listening to the forest's morning chorus, replacing the mechanized rhythms of captivity. Estera sat beside him, her slight shoulder pressed against his arm. "Dokąd idziemy?" "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the stream's gentle murmur. Jacob's mind, so accustomed to precision and calculation, could offer no certain answer. The geography of freedom remained unmapped territory. He had memorized every centimeter of captivity, but possessed no chart for liberation. The words came slowly. "Na południe, do partyzantów." South, to the partisans. Rumors had circulated through the camp. Resistance fighters in the southern forests, Jews and Poles who had escaped, fighting with salvaged weapons and desperate courage. Perhaps only legend, perhaps salvation. Estera's small hand found his, fingers intertwining. "Będziemy wolni. We will be free." Jacob looked at the sleeping children, at the forest stretching around them, at morning light filtering between trees. Freedom remained a distant shore, separated by hunger, winter, pursuit, and war. Yet for the first time in 3 years, possibility existed. He squeezed Estera's hand gently and discovered within himself the capacity for speech once more. Words emerged like water from stone, each one a small miracle of reclamation. Już jesteśmy. We already are. The forest absorbed his words, carrying them toward the lightning sky. Behind them, the camp continued its grim business. Ahead, war raged. But here, 6 children had rewritten the equations of their existence beyond barbed wire and numbered tattoos. Jacob tilted his face toward the breaking day, feeling warmth touch his skin. His voice, newly rediscovered, held steady as he spoke again. Not to Estera, not to the sleeping children, but to the memory of his father that he carried within. I remember who I am. Car radio. The silence is deafening. Finley stares at the empty slot where the radio should be. The hole in the center console mocks him. The engine roars and jumps to life. Finley laughs at the power and presses the gas pedal. The engine responds and races down the street. He sighs and shrugs off the silence. At least it's a nice car, he thinks to himself. Finley grips the steering wheel tighter and continues to drive. He's never driven a convertible before. The large amount of snacks sits in the passenger seat. 3 bags of chips, several candy bars, a meat stick, a couple of grape sodas, Red Bull, and an orange Gatorade are piled into a small mountain next to Finley. There is also $437 in his pocket. Finley glances at the convenience store in the rear view mirror as he drives away. The gun wasn't loaded, but the clerk behind the desk didn't need to know that. She graciously gives up her drawer in exchange for her life. Finley smiles as the memory of the robbery passes through his head again. "Everything in the drawer, now," he shouts. The clerk cries, but nods in understanding and opens the register. Ding. This is much easier with a gun, thinks Finley. He grins under his mask. He holds the basket of snacks in his free hand and points the gun at the clerk. Ida is the name on her shirt. She's short with straight black hair and small eyes. Tears run down her cheeks as she collects the bills. With a shaky hand, she gives the money to Finley. "Thank you," Finley decides to say. He runs out the store and watches as a Chevrolet Corvette pulls up to the store. An older gentleman shuts off the engine and opens the door to get out. He sees the gun before he sees Finley. "Give me the keys," Finley says loudly to the man. The elderly man jumps in surprise and quickly hands the keys to Finley. Finley dumps the basket of snacks into the passenger seat, puts the car in reverse, and drives down the road. When he is clear of the scene, he pulls off his mask and tosses it on the floor. He goes to adjust the radio, but the dial isn't there. The whole compartment is empty. Finley is an average man with an average build. His curly locks meet his eyebrows and licks his earlobes. His eyes are wide and too big for his narrow face, close together with long lashes. Stubble on his chin creeps its way up to his sideburns. The long bridge of his nose flares into broad nostrils, and his big pink lips pushes out from his face. He has a birthmark in the shape of a small diamond under his left eye. His cheeks are freckled and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finley prefers Xbox over PlayStation and drinks apple juice more than a grown man should. He hates roller coasters because he has to sit next to strangers. He loves school, but dropped out his senior year. Finley is passionate, creative, and extremely intelligent. Finley wasn't always a thief, but the worst in his life brings out the best in him. Did I forget to feed Edison? Finley thinks to himself. Edison is his pet goldfish, who spends his days in a sphere on Finley's nightstand. Finley's hamster died in a freak vacuum accident when he was in kindergarten, and since then, he was against pets. Edison was a prize Finley had reluctantly won at a carnival. So far, he's lasted over a year and tripled in size. Finley tugs nervously at his Iron Maiden shirt as he passes a cop. He checks his speed and cautiously pulls the seatbelt over his chest and clicks it into place. He thinks, "Don't pull me over, please." He isn't ready to deal with the police. He hasn't thought this far ahead. The officer turns left and into a gas station. Finley sighs, relief, and looks back at where the radio should be. It's too quiet for him. His thoughts float carelessly through his head. He pictures himself as a police officer for a moment and laughs at the thought. If his dad was around, or if his mother stopped drinking, if his brother never beat him, and if he stayed in school. He wondered where his life would have been then. What kind of person he would be now. An outstanding citizen, he imagines, with a wife and kids. He creates the vision of his family in his head. A woman with large breasts and red hair. 2 kids, 1 boy and 1 girl, with toothless smiles on their dirty faces. They would be soccer players, like Finley was, and always outside. He shakes off the thought. Sucks not having a radio, he thinks. He sits up taller in the driver's seat and lets out a little scream. Ah. He relaxes and slumps back into his seat. He tries to whistle and fails, only allowing air to escape his pursed lips. He blows a tune through his teeth and grunts in frustration. I wish I knew how to whistle. Both my parents could. Even Franklin can, he says in his head. He tries again, and a small tweet of a sound flies from in between his lips. He grins at his small accomplishment. I hate tuna fish, he thinks. Finley starts to space out behind the wheel. The lack of sound tricks his brain. He visualizes a concert he went to last year. He remembers all the pockets he picked and wallets he stole. He made 5 times the amount of the cost of the tickets he paid for, but wasn't able to enjoy the concert properly. The songs of the band echoes throughout his mind. He taps the steering wheel to the beat of the song stuck in his head. He hums the melody. He looked back at the center console and sighed loudly. There wasn't even a clock. What time is it? He wondered. I should have stolen a watch. Or a car with a radio. The car was quiet. Even the purr of the engine was hushed. Everything is still, except the thoughts in Finley's head. He thinks about the graduation he never attended, the smell of his last girlfriend right before she walked out the door, the taste of sea salt ice cream and how it was superior to any other flavor. He pictures the last family photo they had together when times were good. How Franklin had his arm around him in a rare, loving embrace. It is loud in Finley's head, and there is no sound to hide behind. He groans and tries to shake off all his thoughts, clear his head. It's no use. The thoughts always come back, stronger and louder than before. He is going mad from the silence. I can pull the steering wheel. It would be easy to wreck such a nice car. The guardrail teases Finley. He envisions the crash in his head and plays out the scene slowly. The metal twisted around the body of the convertible, the popped wheel and broken windshield. He shakes off the thought and continues driving, now upset by the concept he created in his mind. He can't distract himself from himself. There was nothing to drown out his perception of his own ideations. He can't clear his head. He's trapped within himself. Finley screams and pulls the car over. The wheels spin angrily against the dirt on the shoulder. He bangs the steering wheel with a fist and groans. He hears the sound of sirens and looks in the mirror. He didn't notice the police officer that pulled a U-turn at the last intersection. He didn't see the car behind him getting closer and closer. He watches as a police officer steps out of his squad car and aims a gun at his Corvette. Now what? This isn't part of his plan. He licks his lips and glares at his new challenge. He throws the car into drive and slams on the gas pedal. The car lurches forward and spins wildly back on the road. The cop calls it in and drives after Finley. The 2-lane road was barren. The twists and turns makes Finley feel he was back on a roller coaster without the strangers. The contents of his stomach sloshes around. Well, this is great. He wanders ahead, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't know these streets that well. and another police car pulls up alongside Finley. He kicks up the speed and lets out a yelp as the car responds. They race down the street. The sirens blare loudly. Finley watches as the police cars serve and drive around each other like synchronized swimmers after him. These guys are good, but not as good as me. I need to lose them. He thinks about car chase videos he's watched online and in movies. The bad guy always gets caught somehow, with some small mistake he plans to avoid. He turns down a dirt road quickly, but the cars behind don't falter and follow him. The dirt is slick on the wheels, and with the sharp turn, he flips the car. He curses himself as the car rolls into the ditch upside down. The sound of scrapping metal pierces his ears. It's quiet for a moment as the dust settles. He wasn't going to get caught. Especially now, they will find out exactly how many people he's robbed. He isn't planning on going to jail. Edison would miss him. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," the officer shouts, spit flying out of his mouth. They were behind open car doors, ready for Finley to react. Finley's heart races as his hands went for the unloaded gun. "You'll never take me alive, coppers," he shouts in his mind. He smiles. He was on the track and field team in high school. Surely he could outrun the police. He's done it before, with success. He pushes the car door open, and without thinking, Finley hops out the car and runs, pointing the gun behind him. His feet slip on the loose gravel, but he collects himself and moves his feet fast underneath him. He takes 3 more steps away from the police, gun heavy in his hands. Bang! The silence is deafening. Late for rest, this story centers around death. "I'm late," she thought, as she ran for the bus. Her friends would say that was her life's motto. Amelia scrambled on the bus, trying not to jostle anyone. She had been given a final warning about not getting to work on time and knew her boss was serious. She was good at her job, but this city had over 2 million people. She could be replaced. In fact, she was one of many autopsy technicians who were employed at her job. She enjoyed working with her colleagues and liked working under her supervisor. The problem was, on top of being a natural procrastinator, she was in school full-time while working full-time. But this was her last semester. Her goal was to become an ME. She had always been interested in true crime as a kid and spent her free time watching the ID channel. Her first interest was in forensic science because she wanted to investigate crime scenes. But death and dead bodies never bothered her. And she started working in the morgue as an undergrad, which spurred her interest in forensic pathology. It was then that she learned she was gifted in reading corpses. All those years of hearing about petechiae, cyanosis, and lividity became useful. She could read bodies like a book. That, combined with her proclivity for stockpiling information about diseases and murder, made her a veritable glossary of forensic pathology. Amelia was well liked at work because she was knowledgeable and friendly. Plus, she had a great work ethic while at work. It was outside of work that she struggled with procrastination. She just struggled to stay focused. If she had an assignment to do that required research, she'd end up going down rabbit holes on a side topic that caught her eye. She would know it's time to stop. But if a deadline wasn't impending, she knew she could get away with pushing something off in favor of exploring her current interest. This habit is what created such a wealth of knowledge for her. Unfortunately, it also made her have to do everything last minute or even late. Since becoming an adult and responsible for her own finances, she has never filed her taxes on time. 2 years in a row, she forgot altogether. To compensate, Amelia didn't get much sleep and often slept through her alarms. It was probably her body and brain's way to ensure she got enough sleep. Her boss didn't care how good of a worker she was if she continuously showed up late. She understood that, yet she still struggled to alter her habits. On top of that, she couldn't stay late because of her grad research. She had a thesis to finish and defend. Amelia lived in a state of guilt and shame over not being better at time management, but figured she'd have time to learn how to get better at it later. Today, it was important to not be late. There was still a possibility of making it on time. She missed her first bus, but ran full speed 6 blocks to catch a different one. She had a chance to rest before her stop, and then she'd have to sprint again for the light rail. It was a tight plan, requiring more physical exertion than she was used to, especially outside in Houston in the summer. But it was better to turn up drenched in sweat than late. For once, Amelia made it to work on time, and surprisingly, she wasn't sweating or even tired. Smiling to herself, she walked into the lab, expecting a few comments razzing her for unusual timeliness. However, everyone looked stern. This wasn't unusual in a morgue where many unfortunate events cause bodies to end up here. It was especially hard when it was a child or a victim of a violent assault, or worse, a child who was a victim of a violent assault. Occasionally, a friend or relative of one of her colleagues came through. Everyone was very professional, but an underlying awkwardness was always present. Amelia approached the body they were centered around. She looked down at herself. Shock doesn't begin to describe what she felt. Confusion, of course, was also a dominant reaction. Was this a prank? The level of cruelty involved in doing something like this as a prank was beyond her comprehension. "What the fuck?" she yelled. For once, she was not late, And this is how they treat her. No one turned to look at her or even responded. How the fuck did you do this? Doubt started to flood in. She grew up in the foster system. Did she have a sister she didn't know about? Did she have a twin? Who is this? She yelled as her frustration and fear grew. Still, no one met her eye or replied. When did she arrive? Her colleague Nate asked. Half an hour ago, Mike, her supervisor, replied. For once, she was early. What the actual fuck, guys? You are going too far, she screamed. She liked these people. How could they be so cruel? Was this supposed to be some kind of lesson for her extreme tardiness? Like an extreme example of what could happen if she continued living her life, always running late. Ironically, I believe she was hit by a bus while she was running for a different one, Mike suggested. Wow, death by bus, Angela quipped. This is sick. It's not funny. Who is this? She cried. Mike stepped back right into her. Literally into her. It was slowly dawning on Amelia that this wasn't a prank. She looked down at the corpse that was obviously hers. She was dead. She was hit by a bus. It was unfathomable, but she still had a lot to do. I don't think there is a need for an autopsy, Mike announced. Slowly, everyone turned away, and Amelia took the chance to step closer to her body. Wait, she exclaimed. No one listened. Amelia remembered her last moments. She had gotten in an argument with a man near the bus stop. His attempt at catcalling was graphic and disturbing, and she told him, "Shut the fuck up, creep." He retorted with a comment suggesting she needed to be raped. What the fuck is wrong with you? Amelia demanded. You're an uptight bitch who needs a good dicking down, whether you want one or not, he replied. I don't have time for this, she mumbled to herself while looking around for help. She saw a cop car across the street and started to head that way. She had to pause because a bus was rapidly approaching her stop. The last thing she remembers is being pushed. This was not an accident, she yelled at her colleagues. Desperation set in as she realized this would be recorded as an accident instead of the murder it was. Legally, it was probably manslaughter, but when you're the one killed, you feel murdered, not manslaughtered. Her colleagues continued to go about their business as Mike filled out the paperwork. Please, look again, Mike, she said as she peered over his shoulder. She watched him type the details, or her death, which she found the most surreal event of the day. Please, she whispered again, before going to look at her body for evidence that she had been pushed. She needed someone to turn herself over. She even reached out herself. But in her non-corporeal state, there was nothing she could do. She cried tearlessly as she lost hope. I feel we should do something more for Amelia, Angela said. Like plan her funeral? Mike suggested. She had no family, I was thinking more along the lines of an autopsy, she offered. Amelia would have wanted one. It's true. Even if she hadn't suspected an attack, she still would want an autopsy. She had already planned for her body to be donated to the body farm when she died. She had lived a life of science and wanted to continue in death. You're right, Mike said. Before getting up, he changed the paperwork to justify an autopsy. Amelia waited as patiently as she could until it happened. Her body was finally rolled over, and there were marks indicating that she wasn't just pushed, but punched in the back with 2 fists. Holy shit, Angela remarked. Stunned, the whole team began discussing possibilities as Amelia felt herself being pulled away. No, I don't want to go, she cried. This would be the final rabbit hole she'd ever go down, and the most important one to her. She fought against this invisible force tugging her away because her interest was piqued. She had to know that they solved this crime. The cops needed to know to look at security cameras so they could find this guy. She physically felt like she was in a game of tug of war, with her soul being the middle of the rope. Finally, one last tug pulled her away. There's at least one place she could not be late for. Broken statements. I've said too much. It's time for you to go. Detective Foster sneaked a weary glance at her partner, Detective Daniels, before casting a stern expression to the woman they questioned. You haven't said much at all, the detective countered. The living room grew warmer by the minute as the blazing sun rose higher into the sky. It had to be noon by now, and their small town was in the middle of a heat wave. Crime was in short supply, thankfully, and these days, most of the calls they received were from the elderly asking for help to set up their air conditioners. This woman did not have any cool air circulating her home. Her windows were open, letting the stiff, warm air sit like an unwelcome guest. The woman crossed her arms, twisting her head abruptly away from the officers. I can't say much more than I already told you. You're asking too many questions. Foster snapped her notepad shut, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. She turned her back on them to roam the living space. As she walked further away, she heard Daniels scoff. We're asking questions to help you, and I've already told you my answers to those questions. Barely, the woman gasped. I don't like your attitude. Foster made her way into the kitchen as the bickering voices died down in the distance. Not that it was a large house, but she was more focused on looking around while the homeowner was distracted. Normally, she didn't condone her partner arguing with the victim, but sometimes it came in handy as a nice diversion. Earlier that day, the department had received a call from the neighbor claiming she heard breaking glass and then shouting. While on the phone, she noted the shouting had died down and all was quiet. Still, the woman's nerves were shaken and begged for someone to come over and check it out. First, The detectives visited the neighbor, but they didn't get any new information out of her. She was too afraid to even open the door for the officers. She had spoken to them through a crack in a window, motioning to the house next door. Foster made her way to the house first, while Daniels stayed behind to calm the poor lady down some. Foster had to knock on the door twice before the homeowner finally answered. Her name was Marianne Jules, and Foster guessed her to be in her mid to late 40s. She wore silk blouses, black dress pants, and was almost always in 3-inch heels when out around town. A string of pearls dressed her skinny neck that she always fiddled with. There was no wedding band on her finger, and as far as Foster was concerned, the woman didn't have any close family, nor did she know anyone in town before arriving. She lived alone and had recently moved here within the past 6 months. Marianne didn't make much of an effort to get to know the townspeople, and not everyone was eager to welcome her, Foster included. She remained polite, of course, but she was skeptical of visitors, especially visitors who stayed. Foster grew up in Willow's Landing, and over time, she realized one thing everyone here had in common. Every individual who made up the population here was born and raised in this small town. Sure, the occasional tourist came through, but no one ever moved to Willow's Landing, nor did anyone born here ever move out. When Marianne had finally answered the door, she was less than pleasant to see an officer standing on her front porch. She remained standoffish, but gave the detectives enough information for them to figure out the glass shattering the neighbor had heard was a window breaking. Marianne admitted someone broke into her house, which was enough for them to enter the premises, but they couldn't get any more information out of her. Marianne acted scared, but beat around the bush when asked why she didn't call the authorities herself. First, she thought it was her imagination. Then, she changed her tune and claimed she wanted to check it out herself. Apparently, she has a cat hiding around the house somewhere, and suggested that maybe the feline had knocked over a vase. According to Marianne, it took her a while to discover the window because a 2-story condo is a lot of square footage to cover. It was tough for both detectives to remain impartial as they questioned her, but that was all they needed, for her to admit a window broke. How did the window break? Daniels had asked. Which window was it? Mind if we check it out? Foster had questioned. That was when Marianne stopped playing with the pearls on her neck and pressed the back of her hand to her forehead as though she were ready to faint. Claiming she had said too much, Foster sauntered through the kitchen, taking in the surroundings. It was pristine, almost as if Marianne had never used it before. Yet, a knife was missing from the butcher block on the counter by the sink. The dishwasher was open a crack, so maybe Marianne did cook and was simply a neat freak. Regardless, the detective made a mental note of the missing knife. Too obvious? Maybe. But Foster didn't have a good feeling about this woman. The window above the sink was still in one piece, which was the main reason Foster looked around the place, determined to find this broken window. She rounded the island in the middle of the room and exited through the back. It led to a hallway. To her left was a bedroom, and in front of her was a bathroom. The detective peered into both rooms, but the windows were still intact. She made her way down the hall, the voices of her partner and Marianne growing louder. They still argued as Daniels tried to get more information out of the supposed victim. But Marianne had none of it. She kept scoffing in response without using her words. Marianne acted like a child, and as Foster re-entered the living room, she could see the impatience and swelling frustration written all over her partner's face. She was on the other side of the living room now, behind Marianne, who didn't seem to notice the detective's return. Or maybe she didn't notice the absence beforehand. In no attempt to relieve her partner, Foster locked eyes with her him. She gave a curt nod while pointing up. Daniels didn't answer, but turned his attention back to Marianne instead. Foster walked up the stairs to see what she could find on the second floor. At the top of the landing, Foster faced the second bathroom. It was clean, the window unbroken. To the right was another room that looked to be an office or study area. Like the rest of the house, it looked untouched. The window was open, but not broken. A tuxedo cat sunbathed on the windowsill. So the cat was real, after all. Foster turned around, the stairs to her left now. She could hear her partner spouting off something to Marianne, but she couldn't make out the words. It was only a matter of time before Marianne kicked them out, so Foster had to act fast. There was one room left in the house, straight down the hall. If there was no broken window in there, she didn't know what they were doing here. Quickening her pace, the detective poked her head into the room at the end of the hall, which looked like the primary bedroom, judging by the queen-sized bed. Bingo! The window above the vanity was shattered to bits. Foster stepped into the room, noticing a messy trail of glass from the window to the other side of the room. Halfway through the trail, the glass on the floor mixed with red spots on the beige carpet. The detective stepped to the left, following the trail, before huffing out an exasperated sigh. On the other side of the bed, invisible from the doorway, lay the body of a man. Instinctively, Foster crouched beside the body, pressing her fingers against his neck. No pulse. She figured as much. She studied the body briefly. The deceased lay on his stomach, arms laying above his head, as though he had tried to break his fall. His legs stretched out behind him, as though he fell to his knees first. Foster grunted as she recognized the kitchen's missing knife from the butcher block sticking out of his back. From the cuts in his shirt, it looked like he had been stabbed at least twice, and clearly didn't see his attacker coming. A pool of blood, still damp, surrounded the body. He likely bled out rather than the stab killing him. Foster stood, staring down at the body. Marianne didn't live with anyone, and with the window shattered, this man must have been the culprit. It was easy to assume Marianne defended herself and stopped the intruder before stealing anything, though she couldn't yet speak those accusations aloud, as it was all speculation. Foster looked forward, noticing a pair of doors. Whatever he was after must have been inside the bedroom closet, unless he heard Marianne coming up the stairs and tried to hide. Without being able to make out the words, Foster heard Marianne's voice raise. It seemed time was up. Before heading back downstairs, the detective made a quick call for backup and forensics. The house was now a crime scene, and the detectives would gladly leave the home for now. But little did Marianne know she was going with them. Foster sauntered down the stairs as she wrote notes in her notepad. About halfway down, she heard Marianne's sharp tone. "What were you doing upstairs? Who gave you permission to go upstairs?" "You did," Foster replied. "We came over to check out a possible break-in, and you let us inside. I checked things out, and yep, you've got a broken window." Marianne swallowed a lump in her throat. She stomped over to the front door, opening it wide. "Out. After you," Foster responded. She walked over to the door, motioning for Marianne to lead the way with a smile. "The house is a crime scene now, so we'll need to vacate the premises until forensics gets here." A squeak escaped Marianne's lips, but she didn't move. Foster held out a hand. "Shall we walk out together?" Marianne glared at the officer, clutching her pearls. "I can walk myself. Thank you very much." She snubbed the detective by throwing her nose in the air as she strutted onto the porch and down the front steps, as though it was her idea to exit. Daniels leaned closer to his partner as the two stepped outside, closing the front door. "I'm confused. The broken window was in the master bedroom, along with the body of a man with a knife sticking out of his back. When walking through the kitchen, I noticed the butcher block missed a knife," Foster explained in hushed tones. Daniels exhaled, putting his hands on his hips. "A homicide? We haven't seen one of those in, what, a decade? Something like that. And to think one of our residents was a trespasser. Who died?" Foster watched Marianne, who paced her front yard, one hand fiddling with her pearls, and the other by her mouth as she bit her fingernails. "Subtle. That's the concerning bit," she answered. "More concerning than our newest resident possibly being a murderer? I didn't recognize the body." Daniels let his arms fall against his sides. "That's not possible. We keep track of who enters town, even tourists. No one's entered Willow's Landing since Marianne arrived 6 months ago." Foster shrugged her shoulders. "I said it was concerning." Daniels threw his head back, groaning. "So, we have a new resident who keeps to herself, and a stranger new to town who breaks into her house and she murders him in return. Technically, we can't say she was the one who murdered him. It's definitely likely, of course, but we need to do some investigating first. It's still enough to hold her for questioning. Daniels smirked. Foster chuckled. This is true. She can't run away or avoid our questions anymore now, can she? They heard sirens in the distance, getting louder as backup arrived. The detectives noticed Marianne freeze in her tracks, looking off into the distance. Before she could make a break for it, the partners sandwiched her. Are you aware there's a dead body in your bedroom? Foster questioned. Marianne gasped. Excuse me? So, you didn't see anyone in your room? Daniels added. Marianne twisted her head to face him. She glared at him. Of course not. Are you aware the broken window was in the main bedroom? Foster continued. Marianne turned her head back around to face her. Well, yeah. I went to check it out, remember? I thought the cat broke something. You saw the window, but didn't see the body? Daniels pressed. Marianne breathed heavily, looking back and forth between the two. Finally, she threw her hands up, narrowing her eyes at the ground. I don't know what you think you're trying to do, but it won't work on me. A couple police cruisers pulled up to the house. Neighbors started peering out from behind their curtains, some sitting on their front porches. One man, not even trying to be subtle, started dusting his swing porch while making heavy eye contact with the police arriving. Are you aware there's a knife missing from your kitchen? Foster proceeded anyway. Marianne stomped her foot, covered ears, and squeezed her eyes shut. The detectives rolled their eyes at one another. Daniels took this as an opportunity to step away to get the rest of the team up to speed. I refuse to be interrogated like this. You came by without my calling you for help. You searched my house without a warrant. Now you're treating me like some sort of criminal. Foster folded her arms, shrugging nonchalantly. Fine. Forget the body. The fact remains that someone broke into your house, and now they're dead. Were you expecting anyone today? Marianne relaxed her shoulders, staring quizzically at the detective. No. Was someone staying with you at your house? No. Have you spoken to anyone recently about something special you keep in your house? Do you know why anyone would want to break in? Marianne shrugged, shaking her head. She played with her necklace again, deep in thought. No, I've never even seen him before. Foster sighed, pulling out her handcuffs. What are you doing? Marianne took a step back in horror. Seen who? Foster pressed, holding on to the cuffs. Marianne hesitated, but pointed to her house. With a condescending attitude, she said, "The supposed body you claim to be in my house?" Matching her tone, Foster replied, "We never said the body was a man." Marianne froze, pressing her lips together. "Put your hands behind your back," Foster said. Marianne did as she was told, too shocked to disobey. She listened as Foster read her rights, too stunned to speak. As soon as Foster completed the speech, Marianne opened her mouth to protest. But the detective stopped her as she led her to a squad car. "Don't speak," she ordered. "You've said too much already." January 21st. It was another one of those days. The rain was pouring down like iron sheets. The train had come half an hour late, and I had lost my wallet in the station bathroom. In moments like these, you truly wonder whether a higher power was out to get you. When the train finally pulled up at 1:30, I glared it down. Most people would have been blown away by the pristine white sheen, the unnatural silence of the engine, or the blast of sub-zero aircon that streamed out of the open doors. But not me. 21 years of life had taught me enough about the world. I trudged onto the carriage at the end and plopped myself down on the backmost seat. If I had been just 10 years younger, no, even 2 months younger, I might have enjoyed the richness of the leather or the antique smell of the wooden armrests. But I wasn't the young fool that I once was. As we slowly pulled out of the gloomy building, I finally let out the breath I had been holding in all day. I knew where I was going, of course. I knew what I was going to do. Even without the map pasted on the chair in front of me, I knew the name of my destination in my bones. Sunset Station, where my path ended. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain platter against the window, like bullets. The last lullaby I'd ever enjoy, I supposed. I fiddled with a golden chain strung around my neck. Not even a minute passed by when someone tapped my shoulder. "Is this seat taken?" I prized my eyes open and felt my heart skip a beat. She had flawless skin, about a shade darker than sandstone. Her jet black hair cascaded down in smooth waterfalls, gently brushing against her lower back. They formed a loose curtain over her chocolate eyes, which glittered like galaxies. A burgundy jacket was draped over her shoulders, the velvet seeming softer than cat fur. Her nails were dabbed with a light layer of wine nail polish, complementing her lips. Something about her seemed oddly familiar to me, even though I'd never met her before. "Is it taken?" she repeated. Her voice was a soft jingle, a quiet chortle. I blinked. No, I let out a tiny groan when she plopped herself down, the smell of vanilla following her. The one thing I didn't want to do was engage in conversation on the tail end of my journey. So, of course, it was the first thing that happened. We sat in silence for a while, the pinging of the bullets of rain making the only sound in the carriage. I glanced out the window and heaved a sigh. The same flooded fields, dreary hills, the same ashen sky. I guess it wasn't much to miss. The speakers crackled to life, interrupting my train of thought. "Welcome on board the Destiny Line. The next stop is Sunset Station, where this service ends." "Sunset, sunset, sunset. Are you going to Sunset Station?" the woman asked. I started and silently cursed myself. "Oh, yes, I am. Didn't mean to disturb you." I chanced a glance at her face again. Where had I seen her before? A wide grin spread, flashed across her rose lips. "That's splendid," she purred, blatantly ignoring all of the subtle hints I was dropping. As if on cue, she swiveled towards me. "I heard there's a beautiful, ethereal wooden bridge there that overlooks a waterfall. You planning on going? My journey ends there." I didn't bother elaborating. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a helpless guinea pig. I hated that, the way her brown eyes drilled right through me and came out the other side. There was something off about her. I just couldn't place my finger on what it was. Why did it all seem so eerily familiar? "So you have gone there before," she pressed, her breath the sickening smell of peppermint. "Surely you must have gone there with someone else." "Yes." The word slipped out of my mouth like an eel slipping out of wet hands. "How delightful!" she exclaimed with a sharp giggle. "I did too." "Who did you go with?" The question was a wrecking ball. Who? Her voice was a gong, the words, the beats ringing in my mind. "My fiancé." Her stare was like a magnet, drawing out the words from my lips. Or at least, she was. My voice was dark and bitter. "What business do you have with my life? I'm only interested in my own life." She stared at her palms. "At least, I hope I am. Something happened to me, and I need your help in making sense of it." That struck a chord with me. "I'm sure you loved her, as I once did to my boyfriend." She was the fire to my ice, the black to my white, the day to my night, the sun to my moon, the joy to my grief, the good to my evil, the hope to my grief, the solace to my rage, the life to my death. We were worlds and eons apart, but we were perfect together. Every second I spent with her was an hour of paradise. The ground she stepped on was kissed by God. She was my Polaris when I was sailing across the ocean of my life. A single teardrop crept down my cheek, the hot scar of the past. She's dead now. Since when? Since 2 months ago. Died in a tragic accident. I coughed and started fiddling with the chain again. Something flashed in the woman's eyes. Car crash, shattered spine. Her voice sounded like an autumn breeze, hiding the cold of winter in the warmth of summer. Dead in the night of the 21st of January. Each word she spoke sent flashes of red across my vision. Gray Malibu came out of nowhere. "Yeah?" I narrowed my eyes at the woman. "How did you know?" "My boyfriend knew someone who died on the 21st in a car crash as well." She cleared her throat. "How did you meet her?" "At a university. We both majored in criminology. We matched each other's cautiousness and prudence." "And you studied in criminology as well." "Met him when I was an undergraduate." It's funny, really, how similar our two stories are. It truly was. She turned to me again, scanning me up and down. What aren't you telling me? What do I have to tell you? The real question is, what aren't you telling me? Sighing, she murmured, I'm trying to find out why my life took a turn for the worse 2 months ago. And now, suddenly, this morning, I woke up to find that no one knew me, and the world's colors were bleached. So please, I need your help. Her lips were truly interesting. The way they pursed. They were perfectly arched, like Cupid's bow. Where had I seen them before? What do you need my help with? On the day of the accident? What were you feeling? Grief. Are you sure? What kind of question is that? Of course I was. Again. Are you sure? What are you implying here? I spat, clenching my fists. I hated her so much then. The way she never flicked her eyes off of me for 1 second. What I'm saying, she continued, is that you and I both know that you felt something else that night. Guilt. Her voice was the buzz of a beehive. I doubt most people would have liked it. I swear, though, I heard it somewhere before. In the distance, the train began to whistle. I chanced a glance out the window. The rainy plains had been blotted out by a black tunnel. The Stygian wall was a nice reflection of my mind, I suppose. All aboard the Destiny Express. Yes, I snarled. I felt guilty. I felt guilty because we'd been arguing right before she ran out of the house. I tried to call her back. She didn't even look. Before she dashed across the road, something clicked inside my head. But you knew that already, didn't you? Goosebumps spread across my arm when she nodded. The hazy puzzle was slowly getting clearer. What were you arguing about? Why would I think it would be better for both of us if you stop hiding the truth, she interrupted. So, I'm going to ask again. What were you quarreling about? I'm sorry. Those deep brown eyes weren't galaxies. That was my mistake. They were black holes, sucking in everything. I was confronting her about what I saw that afternoon. My voice was black ice. I came home early, and I discovered that there were 2 other people in the house, being intimate with each other. The man, I still don't know who. The woman? Well, needless to say, I did know who it was. I shuddered. She nodded again, slower this time. What did she say to you when you confronted her? That I didn't really love her? That I never really did? That I was exploiting her for money? Were you? Well, I filched the occasional penny or 2. I winced under her glare. Fine. I forced her to pay for my tuition fees. She has so much money that she doesn't know what to do with it anyhow. Might as well put it to good use. I toyed with my golden chain again. The woman didn't seem to agree with me, but she moved on. All right. I think you've helped me clear up a lot of problems now. Before I could heave a sigh of relief, she continued. But there's still one last question I want to ask you. What could that be? I started rubbing my fingers against the golden chain. The chain had the dull, tingling smell of iron, just like something else. Something dark. Where were you at the moment of the accident? Shadows gathered around her eyes. I told you already. Which is where, again? Steel hands gripped my lungs. I was calling out to her, trying to stop her from recklessly dashing. She didn't listen to me. Was I imagining things? Or was there a flicker somewhere on her face? No, her neck was flickering. It was slowly bending, slowly becoming deformed. Or was I imagining things? She spoke 2 words. You're lying. The temperature seemed to plummet. What? You're lying. You know it in your heart. You've known for 2 months. Oh my. Death is a lie. No, no, no. It couldn't be happening. But it was staring right back at me. The truth clicked, like the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle fitting in. I knew now. I knew everything. Fine. 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 I admit it. I wasn't running after her. I wasn't calling out to her. I wasn't trying to stop her. No. I'm a double-faced liar. Yes, that's what I am. A psychopath. My fiancée did not die in an accident. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I dragged her out of the house. I threw her in front of a speeding gray Malibu. Oh, I watched her die. I knew it in my bones. Oh, then what are you? How are you here? Haunting me to my very last day. Why have you come back? Why? Are you even real? That, she whispered. You will never know. You have lived 2 months in anguish because I never truly left you. Every hour of your life has felt like a tortured second crawling by. Just look at what's hanging from your neck, the golden mark of Cain. I tore it off the chain and pressed it against my face. No, forgive me, please. Tears streamed down my face, a waterfall of guilt. I'll do anything. The train came to a stop at the station. Sunset. The end of the line. Oh, her smile. I hated her smile. The way they were draped over the fury within her. She glanced out the window, out of the station, out of the world. I followed her gaze at the bridge overlooking the waterfall, where it all began. There's always a way out. She stood up. How horrible she looked. The way her head was tilted to the side, almost as if her spine was broken. I trust you'll know what to do. Goodbye, Daigel. She stepped off the train. What she left behind. California, 1868. Clara Emerson pressed herself against the train window, her eyes glazed and alert from exhaustion. She stretched out her aching legs, revealing her muddy shoes that poked out from underneath the hem of her dress. She retracted her feet back from visibility, gathering and stroking her straw-like, graying hair as she peered out the window. Clara glanced to see if anyone was watching her. Only a handful of people sat behind her, none of which were looking in her direction. No, I'm safe. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself. But unease coiled in her chest and churned in her belly. Turning in her seat, she lowered her gaze to the small diamond band on her finger. Sunlight caught in its facets, scattering tiny prisms across her skin. For just a moment, she marveled at its beauty. Clara looked up and locked eyes with a man several seats ahead, clean-shaven, with thin-framed spectacles perched on his nose. The man stared at her with a hollow, unreadable expression. Her pulse kicked. How long had he been watching her without her noticing? Her skin went pale and clammy, like a predator spotting easy prey. The man rose from his seat and approached her, not breaking eye contact once. Clara's stiffened in her seat as the man approached. "Go away. May I sit? I have a long journey ahead of me, and I could sure use the company," he said to her. "No." Of course, the man sat down across from her. His eyes remained on her, almost as if they were boring into her very soul. "Didn't anyone tell you it's rude to stare?" she asked him, hoping that illuminating his behavior would cause him to cease. But it did not. "Forgive me, ma'am. It's just, you look so familiar. Do we know each other, perhaps?" "No, I don't recall your face. You must be mistaken." "No, I think we do know each other." Why won't he quit? "Where are you from?" "I'm not going to tell you that. You haven't even told me who you are." "Ah, how foolish of me. My name is Simon Klein." He leaned forward, extending his hand to her. He sat back down and continued to stare at her, expectantly this time. Clara sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I'm Elaine. Elaine Whitmore. Elaine. I would have taken you for an Alice or Charlotte or Clara." Clara froze in her seat, her eyes wide and her palms sweaty. Who is this man? "No, I'm just Elaine." Mr. Klein gave her a wry smile, shaking his head. "So, where are you headed to?" Clara shrugged. "Anywhere that's far away from here." "Ah, come on. California's the place to be. There's opportunity here." "Not for me. Not anymore." "Shame," he said. "What is?" Mr. Klein chuckled. "Surely you have friends or family that will miss you. It almost sounds like you're running away." Now he was just getting on her nerves. "You're quite brazen, Mr. Klein. My business is none of your concern." Mr. Klein pressed his lips tightly together, as if he were in pain, and forced out a smile. "My apologies, Mrs. Whitmore. I never quite learned how to keep my nose out of others' affairs. I am a curious fellow, curious indeed." Hoping to break the tension, she pulled out a flask from underneath her shawl. "Care for a drink?" A wild glimmer in his eyes appeared. It was as if he wanted to reach out and strangle her. "No, thank you," he said, his demeanor shifting. There was something dangerous underneath this man's calm exterior. Somehow, that made him more terrifying. If he were angry and violent from the start of their encounter, she could predict his next move and accept that she was under attack. But this man unnerved her to her core. There was something almost familiar about him. Gathering her shawl, she stood from her seat, and as steady as she could present herself to be, she faced him. "I think I would prefer to be in my own company for the rest of the journey. Good day to you. Please, there's no need to leave. If you wish to be alone, I can accommodate." Mr. Klein stood, moving back to his original seat. Clara returned to hers, facing away from Mr. Klein this time. But she could still feel his eyes on her. She waited until the train had passed a dilapidated old shack close to the tracks before rising from her seat and creeping her way down toward the caboose. Her heart quickened, as did her pace. "Excuse me, sir," she heard behind her. Sucking in a breath, she chanced a glance behind her, locking eyes with Mr. Klein, who was trailing close behind her. He did not smile this time at her. His eyes were cold and focused on her intently, like before. But there was a rage in those eyes, a bloodlust, in fact. She didn't think twice this time, turning and running down the aisle like a mad woman. She stumbled through the empty train carts, praying an escape plan would present itself to her before he reached her. But there wasn't enough time, and there was nowhere left to run. "I'm trapped." She looked out the back window and considered the tracks. Maybe she could jump. Maybe. She might still have a chance. The door behind Clara creaked open. She spun around to see Mr. Klein reaching into his coat pocket, revealing a silver pistol. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes trained on Mr. Klein, if that even was his name, and she pressed herself against the back door of the caboose. He pointed the barrel at her. Rage oozed out from beneath the calm, collected persona he performed earlier. His hand trembled, but he remained in control of himself for the moment. Clara trembled, terrified of what he would do to her. "What do you want from me? Why are you following me?" "I saw you," Mr. Klein said. "I saw what you did to my sister that night." Whatever she planned on saying to him, the words fell empty in her mouth. "This is it. It's over." "What? You thought no one saw you sneak out of her house in the dead of night? And I find my sister dead in her home? No, that's a lie. I would never harm anyone. I'm a good woman." "How do you sleep at night?" he said, his finger twitchy on the trigger. "I know it was you who did it. No sooner had I returned from my hunting trip, I see you sneaking out of her house like some rat. She was dead when I found her. Please, have mercy on me. I would never do such a thing. Liar. Mr. Klein drew closer. She fumbled for the handle behind her, desperate for escape. Her weight against the door caused it to swing open, landing her on her back. She held her hands over her head to shield herself. "Why?" he cried. "Why did you do it? Tell me!" A shrill, raspy whistle emanated from the front of the train, distracting Mr. Klein for the briefest moment. Clara seized the opportunity and kicked Mr. Klein in the shin, dropping him to his knees. He screamed, clutching his leg as the gun clattered next to him. Without a second thought, she scrambled for the pistol and swiped it, aiming the barrel at him. "Get up," she said. Mr. Klein held his hands up, pushing himself up off the floor. "I'm not the one that deserves this. I'm not going to die today." She pressed her finger to the trigger, but it wouldn't budge. The hammer. Mr. Klein grabbed hold of the barrel and yanked it back hard. Too hard. Clara released the pistol, and with it, Mr. Klein, screaming as he staggered backward, tumbling off the train. He hit the tracks hard, rolling like a rag doll, before coming to rest, bloodied and limp, his lifeless eyes fixed toward the sky. The wind violently whipped Clara's hair as Mr. Klein's body disappeared beyond view. She steadied herself against the railing, her thumb absent-mindedly tracing the curve of the diamond. Lost in a thought she refused to finish. I spy with my little eye. It's funny, the things one thinks about when staring dramatically out the window. Even funnier, the things we do. I stopped racing raindrops a few miles back when I kept winning. My mother was right. Winning at everything gets unbelievably boring. Who knew a car window would teach me that lesson? Trailing my eyes lazily over the book on my lap, I deliberate. I could read, but that would mean turning on the overhead light, and I don't want what's out there to see me any better than it already does. Besides, reading in the back seat makes me nauseous. Sighing, I look out the window again. Dark skies press down on the trees, lining either side of the road, their jagged silhouettes barely visible beneath the moonlight. But I don't need to see them to know it is there. I can feel it, like the fabric of my clothes against my skin, like the weight of my own breath in my lungs. It's waiting, watching. It won't be able to follow us past the state line, not when it's tied by its grave, deep in the very forest it now lurks in. If we can just keep moving, if we don't stop, my fingers tighten around the seatbelt, because in the trunk, wrapped in tarps, are knives. The blood on them should be drying, crusting over. But that doesn't matter. It won't be the knives that get us caught. It'll be it. The road stretches endlessly, twin lines of paint vanishing into the dark. The wipers squeak against the windshield, streaking rainwater instead of clearing it. The radio hums static beneath the commercials, like an unspoken warning. To whom, though? You see it? Bex asks beside me. Out of the four of us, she's freaking out the worst. I've long since put a barrier between our seats to avoid the worst of her rocking and jittery libs. I give her another flat look, hoping this one will shut her up for the rest of our trip. If I did, don't you think I would have said something by now? She whimpers and turns back to her own window, staring wide-eyed at the trees. I meet Rick's eyes in the rearview mirror, and Theo side-eyes me from the passenger seat. None of us say a word. In truth, I can see it. The shifting shadow that vaults across the street every few feet before melting into the trees. It got so out of hand. It was never. No, we did mean to do it. We just didn't think it'd come back to bite us like it did. Is doing. What's also true is that Bex will not be making it past the state limits with us. She can't be trusted. The minute everything was done and buried, she broke. Broken things aren't always fixable, and she is one loose end we cannot risk letting go, or it would end. We were all screwed. Rick blinks twice. I inhale deeply, sighing quietly through my nose. This is part of the plan. It won't chase us past the state limits, because it can't. But it also will have no incentive to do so. It's why we let Bex do it in the first place. Theo hums and raises the volume on the radio. Commercials, figures. Rick blinks one more time. The locks click, lightning flashes, bleaching Bex's side of the car in stark white. She yelps, flinching away from the window. I take my chance, sliding closer and pulling her into an embrace. It'll be okay, I whisper into her hair. Bex clutches at me, desperate. I let her. Everyone deserves comfort in the end. I swallow down my goodbyes. Theo coughs. I kick at his seat. Shut it, my hit says. The timing needs to be right. A shift in the trees. Closer now. The weight of something pressing against the night. Watching. Expectant. Do you hear that? Bex whispers, voice barely there. Like scraping. I don't answer. Because she doesn't hear scraping. She hears breathing. Shh. Nothing's there. You are just hearing things. I finally say, petting her hair. She doesn't feel me slide her seatbelt off or reach for the door handle. The door pops open. Mila, she whispers. Wait. Her fingers dig into my collar. She feels it now. The open air behind her. Too late. I pry her hands off me, using the impulse to send her flying out of the car. Sorry. I squeeze her one last time to make the hard push I give her. Bex screams. Her arms flail, desperate. For the door, for me, for anything. Her fingers catch on the seatbelt, all in vain. She tumbles, hitting the pavement in a mess of limbs. I should look away, but I don't. It roars. I turn just in time to see it pounce on the prone body on the road through the rear window. Rick finally breathes a sigh of relief, and seeing him do so uncoils the tight knot of tension between my shoulders. Theo closes his eyes and smiles, whistling along with the song playing. The car feels bigger now, quieter. I roll my shoulders, adjusting to the absence. Something lingers in the air, something penal, or perhaps something new. 4 down to 3, a new dynamic. Interesting. It's a shame, but change is necessary sometimes, and there is no better time than right now. Isn't that the saying? I unbuckle my seat belt and close the car door. Smooth, careful. I lean between the front seats, smirking at Theo. He rolls his eyes, shaking his head fondly. I kiss Rick on the cheek, breathing in his cologne. He reaches up to stroke my cheek, takes his eyes off the road, long enough to kiss the corner of my mouth. Not a word, he murmurs, to our grave. I grin. It roars behind us. Bex doesn't. We cross the state limits. I sit back. The rain races down my window enthusiastically. Would you look at that? I win again. Just 2 more hours to get home. Cliffhanger. By Lee Kendrick. I had never been to a tropical country before, but Indonesia was my friend's, and I chose a holiday destination after we had scanned the internet for tropical countries. We all agreed to go to the Indonesian island of Sumba, an island as large as Jamaica. Apparently, Indonesia boasts the most islands of any country. Unbelievably, over 17,000. My friends Michael, Bob, and I, Dave, had booked a holiday here for 2 weeks. We planned to do some snorkeling, exploring the coral reefs, and go on some boat trips to some of the Indonesian islands. For now, we were just chilling out on a sun lounger, drinking cold beers on the white sands of the Mbawana beach. The Sumba Island landscape is so rich in exotic plants and animal life. It also boasts unusual rock formations, including the Halfling Giant Stone. This is a coastal rock with a large gaping hole through it. In fact, me and the boys are just 30 feet away from it, to our left. Another unusual thing about Indonesia is the Indian Ocean. It changes color, varying from turquoise to ultramarine blue to a remarkable golden orange. Another thing this part of the world is known for is its earthquakes and tsunamis. Just a few minutes ago, we felt a heavy earthquake, but this was normal for Indonesia. We were glad we weren't in a city full of buildings. The tremor only lasted for about 20 seconds, and then it just fizzled out. Nothing to worry about. Feeling hot, I decided to go for a dip in the ocean. As I slowly walked in the soft, powdery white sand towards the ocean, I sensed a foreboding. and for some reason, I noticed it was taking me longer than usual at this time of day to arrive by the ocean. I also observed pools of seawater with seaweed, crabs, and other sea creatures, which weren't there before. And I'm sure by now I would have been hearing the waves come crashing onto the beach. But the ocean seems much further away. Then it dawned on me as I stared out into the distance. There it was, a few miles away, a massive wall of water. Difficult to measure, but I would say it must be at least 50 feet high, and it was heading towards the beach. It was a tsunami. I had heard in documentaries about how the ocean suddenly withdraws from a beach, heralding a tsunami. Is this my time to die? I thought. I turned and ran as fast as I could, back towards my friends, wearing my stupid flip-flops. As I ran, I observed dozens of people lying on their beach towels, oblivious to what was about to happen. I attempted to shout to warn them, but no words would come from my mouth. I was unable to speak because I was in the grip of fear. I managed to attract a couple's attention, but they just waved back at me and continued sunbathing. I picked up a heavy shell and threw it at them, and then pointed frantically towards the wall of death. I ran and ran, painfully slowly, getting closer towards my friends. Then my friends Michael and Bob saw me. I waved with both hands, frantically in desperation, to try and warn them as I pointed back to the ocean. They just seemed to ignore me. Finally, I reached Michael and Bob to pull them away. My larynx was constricted, paralyzed. I couldn't utter one word as I pointed back towards the ocean. A bloody, gigantic blue-green wave was only a couple of 100 yards away. By now, there were people screaming everywhere on the beach. We all started running. But where? Where do we go? Do you climb a tree? The waves are too high. Do we try to outrun it? No. It's too close behind us, and it must be moving at over 100 per now. Do we go left or right? Maybe the wave isn't as long as the beach. Very unlikely we could escape it. It probably stretches as far as the length of the beach. We kept on running in front for our lives. As the adrenaline coursed through our veins, I spotted the cliff some 50 yards away. The tsunami was now so close behind us, you could hear its thunderous roar, like a wild beast after its prey. As we managed to reach the cliff, we climbed as rapidly as we could, managing some 30 feet when the wave crashed heavily into the cliff. It demolished the halfling giant stone and engulfed the surrounding area. The beach had been swallowed up, and the ocean continued to climb, moving closer towards us. This wild beast wasn't done until it caught up with us, all three of us, now exhausted, and like a gazelle, tired out with all its energy, spent. It was ready to drop and resign its fate to the beast chasing after it. I knew it was just only seconds away before the wave would claim me and my two friends. Suddenly, my heart stopped beating. To my horror, I was unable to lift my leg up to a ledge. It had got entangled in some plant's tendrils. Bob and Michael were too busy escaping to not notice me in trouble. The water was now up to my ankles as I frantically moved my foot to budge it free. The boat just wouldn't move. By now, I resigned to the fact that I was going to drown. As a 26-year-old, I was hoping for longer on this earth, and I just wish Bob and Michael escaped the wave. The water was now rising up to my neck. I closed my eyes and saw flash images of my mother, dad, sister, and brother. But wait a moment. Why hasn't the water covered me yet? I thought. The next thing I noticed was the water level was going down. It was now down to my feet, and I was able now to budge my foot free. The water was drawing slowly away, down to where the ocean and beach would normally meet. I looked up to the top of the cliff, and there, looking down, were my two buddies, Michael and Bob, waving to me, laughing. We all had a miracle escape. Sadly, many tourists didn't, and Jolt Bailey settled into his window seat. He watched other passengers navigate the aisle with their carry-ons. He saw a pretty young woman in sweats making her way toward him. He thought, "Where have I seen her?" He knew they hadn't met. With hardly a glance, she slid into the seat next to him, strapped herself in, and focused on her cell phone. Bailey stared out the window at airport staff prepping the jet for takeoff. Flying was a necessary evil for him. Its charms had faded years ago, but long overdue. He needed this trip. Hearing laughter, he turned toward the woman. The cause of her humor eluded him. Sensing his attention, she turned. "Can I help you? I'm sorry. I heard you laugh, and I was curious. Not that it's any of your business. I got a text from my agent." "You're right. None of my business." She turned away. Bailey said, "I know this sounds stupid, but do I know you? You look so familiar." Suppressing annoyance, she sighed. "You're asking me if you know me? Oh, for the good old days of trite pickup lines. No, really, I'm not. I wouldn't, not with that line." He laughed. "But no, I'm married, not hitting on you. But I could swear," she sighed. "You watch TV? I was in a movie last season." "Ah, right. Okay, cool. Sorry to bother you." Seeking distraction, he fiddled with the video display. Flight attendants worked their way up the aisle. They checked the overheads and confirmed that everyone was securely strapped in. The captain made announcements. Bailey checked his cell phone. An attendant asked him to shut it off until after takeoff. "Of course," he said. He placed it into his jacket pocket. All had settled. The plane began to taxi. Bailey corrected his perception that the exterior was moving and not the plane. Gets me every time. Once airborne, I can relax. The plane paused and then continued rolling forward. The woman turned to him. I didn't mean to be short with you before. Nervous flyer. I'd usually be flattered if someone recognized me. You didn't do anything wrong. Bailey smiled. Not a problem. I imagine fans wanting attention can wear thin. Someday, maybe. But hasn't happened yet. You're one of the few who's actually recognized me. Okay then. Hi. I promise not to stalk you. They laughed. She said, I'm Magnolia. Are you vacationing? Work trip? Glad to meet you. I'm Bailey. Nope. Off to see my kids. Hopefully reconcile with my wife. Long story. You? Getting married. She displayed her ring for him to admire. It was huge. The plane accelerated. This was Bailey's favorite part. Lift off. All that drama. And suddenly, the earth falling away. Bailey's separation from Irene and his twin girls defied explanation. He didn't understand it, nor did she. After 2 years apart, but with non-stop communications, they'd decided to try again. Step by step, once airborne, people relaxed. Some stood waiting for a restroom. Attendants served refreshments. Bailey nodded to Magnolia, who nodded back and looked away. A few minutes later, she became visibly agitated. What's that sound? I don't hear anything odd. You don't? Is that smoke coming from the wing? No. We're going through clouds. Her anxiety seemed to pass. Bailey tried reading. He stared out. Clouds and terrain passed beneath them. He thought about his family. The girls were getting big, about to start school. He dozed. A jolt spilled his water. Someone screamed. Magnolia grabbed the armrest. Bailey thought, air pocket. Normal. With another jolt, the engine sounded ragged. The jet rolled, and more screams followed intense turbulence. Someone fell. People braced themselves. The loudspeakers squawked noise, but no information. Bailey secured his seatbelt and saw Magnolia now crouched in a fetal position. Bailey touched her shoulder. You okay? She said. Yes. No. No. I'm a mess. Can I do something? No. It's too late. There's nothing. No one. Barely able to hear her. He held her shoulder. She babbled. He said, talk to me. I can listen. She stared with wild eyes. The jolts increased. She gasped, I doubt you. You have no idea. He agreed. Holding his gaze, she leaned in. My life's a shambles. I've hurt too many people, used them, betrayed their trust, ruined lives. I stole things. He tried to relate. I'm no saint. You don't get it. Can't. Not talking about a lapse or some white lie, but a pattern. Committed crimes. Horrible. Looking down, she steeled herself. This trip, wanted to make amends. No time now. Need to tell someone. She squeezed his hand. The plane shifted, and they held on to each other. Everyone was screaming. Overhead compartments opened. Luggage rained into the aisle. It felt like the plane was breaking up. He held his focus. Shouting, he said, "You want me to? Listen, let me. Let it out." She sobbed. "I've been vicious. Left people broken in the gutter. Inexcusable." He recoiled, but increasing her grip. She pulled him closer. "Did you? Shut up! Listen, can't die with this weight pressing." He pulled her closer, comforting her as much as possible. Eyes closed, their foreheads touched. They found a moment of peace amid the swirling chaos. "Thank you for putting up with me. Needed this. I love you. Love you too. For what it's worth." "Shh, don't talk. Nothing to say." With another jolt, something changed. Relief. The noise and chaos subsided. And so did the panic. Another jolt generated more screams. Then a collective sigh as the plane settled into stable flight. Soon, the captain announced preparations to land. Everyone needed to stow loose items and fasten seat belts. Attendants assisted an injured passenger. Trying to compose himself, Bailey struggled to digest the last hour. He only wanted to see his family. The landing was uneventful. Everyone cheered when wheels touched down. Passengers lined up to begin disembarking. Magnolia stood into the aisle. She didn't look back. Bailey joined the throng behind her. He touched her shoulder. She turned. He said, "I wanted to say about what happened back there." "Oh, that? Forget it. Acting 101. Just an exercise learned in improv class." Stunned, he said, "What?" "I made it up. I'm an actor. Get it?" It took a moment to comprehend what she'd said. Right. Of course. That was it. She turned away. They didn't speak again. He set his jaw and dug his fingers into the upholstery of the seat beside him. He shut his eyes. Who does that? Whatever she'd done or not, they'd had a real moment. Two people bonded, healed. He didn't care about Magnolia's flaws or crimes, but calling that an acting exercise, Bailey felt violated. Whatever her crimes, this was worse. She's covering, hopes I won't say anything. Plausible deniability, my ass. Bailey reeled from the last hour. He'd never felt such intimacy. Her casual dismissing of it appalled him. Still jittery from the horrible flight, he felt empty. Acting 101? Really? What a load of crap. Passing the flight attendants and pilot at the exit, he thanked them. Once off the plane, they walked toward baggage claim, each playing the role of the strangers they were. Not enough distance. Descending on the escalator, he saw them and waved. His daughters broke from their mother and ran screaming to him. Each embraced a leg, holding tight, laughing, Irene approached with a big smile. Embracing, they felt like family. Welcome back. How was your flight? Rough. But I'm here. I'm okay. She kissed him. I'm glad. They embraced again. Over Irene's shoulder, he saw Magnolia kissing her fiancé. Their eyes met. Smiling, she looked away. Bailey looked at her future husband. Poor sap. The crowd surged as the baggage carousel rumbled. He went to it and awaited his luggage. Reaching for his suitcase, he bumped into Magnolia, also reaching for his bag. He said, "This one's mine. Check the tag." She hesitated and stepped back. "You're right. Sorry." He hoisted the bag onto its wheels and walked to join his family. Nothing more to say.